I was a radio telephonist for 2nd Lieutenant Alden on the Fire Control Armoured Personnel Carrier. My duties also include driving the lieutenant's jeep, which relieves me from duty. So I'm not doing too badly at all. We have to be in constant readiness to move around and provide joint air support to the infantry. It's not very pleasant. They say infantry is almost always asking for support. The guys in our platoon seem to be pretty good, advising and helping me. I wonder if this attitude will be permanent. Tomorrow I will participate in a combat mission for the first time. January 8th, 1967. Our unit is well united. Today it seemed to someone that enemy soldiers were advancing toward our base. The infantry asked for support. The commander ordered us to provide that support. We left immediately. Armoured personnel carriers literally filled the jungle with mines and shells. There was a terrible rumble and howling. I was very scared. If there was anyone in the jungle, there was only a wet spot left. We made a quick search, but found no one. Perhaps the whole alarm was a false alarm. January 9th, 1967. Today we left for the first operation, searching for the enemy and combing the area. The operation will last 10 days. We will search for Viet Cong, weapons depots and documents of the enemy. Sometimes during this period we will guard Highway 15, the main highway from the Mekong Delta to Saigon. The weather is hot, high humidity. I'm getting to know my armoured personnel carrier comrades more and more. There are 6 of us. Scioscia and Zaman are from New York. Christensen, the driver of our transporter, is a Negro from Connecticut. Lieutenant Alden and Sergeant Golas. They all seem to be companionable fellows, and I have a good time with them. We're alternating our duties so that we can each take the place of the other. I'm now taking data from the forward observer and processing it to get horizontal and vertical angles. The fire control armoured vehicle is the brain of the armoured vehicle platoon, and the forward observers are its eyes. I also operate the radio station and receive reports and relay orders. Zerman works with the map. Scioscia performs observer and guard duties. Lieutenant Alden and Sergeant Godas do most of the sleeping. In this way, we are a large and happy family. You feel safe in this armoured car. It goes fast. There are 4 armoured walls around you and powerful 50 and 60 mm guns. When we fire them, there is a terrible rumble in the car. January 11th, 1967. No serious fighting so far. Captured 2 Viet Cong. They are children, no older than 15 or 16, small in stature and very thin, skin and bones. If they represent the people we're fighting, it's not at all clear why the war has lasted so long. Our cars kick up an awful lot of dust. After 1 day of driving, Christensen and I turned white. Today we destroyed several huts, as we suspected they belonged to the Viet Cong. Flame-throwing armoured personnel carriers came up to them and set them on fire with napalm from about 50 yards away. It's a strange war. For 2 days we search and destroy. The next day we stop near a town and entrench ourselves. Our positions are shot at by snipers, forced to clean up. January 12th, 1967. Ran into 2 companies of Charlies today, but they managed to get away from us. They don't like our armoured personnel carriers and 50mm guns. That makes me feel better. Let them run. I don't need to chase them down. We've been searching almost all day, so there's no time to rest. When darkness falls, we stop and dig in. Sometimes food is delivered to us by truck or helicopter, but for the most part we eat combat rations. We are conducting a major operation. It involves about 1,000 men, artillery, infantry and fighter aviation. Charlie is quite difficult to detect, but when we manage to do so, they stand to the death and we open hurricane fire. Everyone's aiming for one thing, to kill as many as possible. I don't feel the fear I expected. My only wish is for it to be over as soon as possible. I'm sick of getting soaked at night and being in unbearable heat and dust during the day. Our cars are kicking up clouds of dust, and our faces are covered with a layer of dirt. The guys on the ploughing armoured personnel carrier are an odd mix of people, but they all know their stuff. Syossia keeps talking about his girlfriend, his mother, and home. Zerman keeps things light-hearted by talking about his college days, what he and the other guys did in the student dorms or at college term balls. Christensen has no interest in anything and recognizes nothing but his duties as a driver. I'm the only rookie among them, but this battalion was transferred here only 10 days before my arrival, so they haven't gotten much combat experience yet. If we have any trouble, it will be because of Lut Alden or Sergeant Gulas. They know their stuff too, but they're lazy as hell. Gulas delegates most of his duties to Christensen and me. We get very little rest because we have to keep watch for 24 hours. We have only one change of underwear, so we are terribly dirty. January 13th, 1967. Still my head is cracking from the noise and rumbling last night. We received data for shelling a Viet Cong village. All of our transporters opened disturbing fire on the tree line. If there were Charlies out there, they're in for a real treat. 11 more months of this kind of war. I wonder how my old folks are doing back home. Haven't heard from them in a long time. You don't get much in the way of letters around here. They keep me going. The only good moments are when we enter a village for a vacation. In some villages, the people treat us well until some sergeant messes things up. They like to bully and intimidate the soldiers, especially us Negroes, when we are talking to some pretty Vietnamese girl. One sergeant, his last name was Paulson, sent me to clean the restroom because he saw me chatting up 2 young Vietnamese girls. No one in the same position as me is ever assigned to that kind of work, but I was. January 14th, 1967. I'll never forget last night. Christensen and I were in the guard at the front of a circular defence. It was about 11 o'clock in the evening. I could barely keep from falling asleep near our foxhole. Suddenly Christensen jumped out of his foxhole and ran at me. I almost shit my pants. At the same time, I felt something roll down my leg and disappear into the bushes. "Listen," Christensen whispered. "There's a Charlie in there." We used everything we had: grenades, a machine gun, all the so-called personal weapons. If there was anyone in the bushes, we must have killed them. I called Sergeant Paulson on the phone, but he said to me, "It's too bad about that. Open your eyes, put your shoes on your nose. Nobody's going to run around in the dark, you just imagined it." We waited for dawn for a long time, and when it finally dawned, we went to look for the bodies of the dead, but found only burnt grass and bushes. Later the guys laughed at us angrily. Now everyone will remember it for a long time. I calculated that we had wasted 7 grenades and 150 rounds of ammunition. My commander says he'll give me a shotgun. He says it's the only shotgun I'll use to hit anything. I don't mind. Let them consider me a bad shot as long as my legs don't fail when I have to retreat. January 16th, 1967. Uncle Sam sends charity parcels every day with sweets, cigarettes, and other little things. These things we are well supplied with. Sometimes, during lull periods, it doesn't feel like we are at war at all, more like some long vacation. Charlie are not fools. They avoid meeting our armoured personnel carriers when we go on a combat mission. The country is really very poor. Wherever we went, there were Vietnamese on their knees begging for alms. Some of the white soldiers make a kind of fun of it. When we drive along the road, there are always crowds of hungry kids on the road. Somebody throws a piece of bread on the road, and the children rush to it like a pack of hungry wolves. Often one or another of them is caught by the transporter, and many are injured in the fight for bread. It is a ghastly picture. Negroes never take part in such matters. Some officers buy monkeys as a lucky charm. I save my money for Scotch whisky. That drink helps when you get nervous for some reason. The 4th Company I used to be in took a real beating last night. I'm not surprised. The guys in that company are as dumb as they come. I hope Cha-Cha and Ashworth are still alive. They say the enemy attacked this company during a drill when the men had no ammunition. What a stupid thing to do. You can't take a step here without a weapon. When we participated in the exercise last week, we had 2,000 rounds of ammunition for each rifle. Everyone in our unit hopes to get home safely. January 18th, 1967. It had to happen. We were conducting a training operation called Laredo. At least that's what we were told. In fact, this drill was conducted with live Viet Cong and the use of live weapons. Another little misunderstanding. Now we're going back to Zulu, which is a good thing. Here, after all, the helmet is your wash basin and bath, and you only sleep in the transporter. Tomorrow there'll be hot food, showers, and clean linen. Very good. According to the order we received today, on the 21st, our battalion will go to the Mekong Delta region. That's strange. We were always told that our armoured personnel carriers were useless there. However, after sitting in the trenches for 2 days in vain, the command probably thinks that we are useless everywhere. I'm starting to get to know the guys in the platoon. A lot of them are New Yorkers, which is the worst soldiers in the army. But we have a common topic of conversation: the New York subway and the Statue of Liberty. There's a Negro in the platoon I met in basic training. His last name is Akers. He's an artilleryman in the 3rd platoon. He's a short, stocky, very dark Negro with big, sad eyes. But he has a very well-developed sense of humour. A Vietnamese girl asked him why he was so dark. He replied, "Oh, baby girl, I am a special man. I'm a night fighter. No Viet Cong will detect me in the dark." January 19th, 1967. It is now certain. We will go to the Delta. We leave tomorrow early in the morning, so everyone is trying to get a good night's sleep tonight. January 20th, 1967. Tough day. We assembled at dawn but did not move until 11 o'clock in the morning. On the way we joined the guarding of the transferred units. They say it takes about 2 days to reach the destination. We only got as far as Saigon today, about 12 miles. The people here are living a little better. We go to bed early. Tomorrow is another hard day. The guys are passing different rumours to each other. Viet Cong ambushes are possible on our way. Many thousands of troops are being pulled to the Mekong Delta area. The High Command will probably move there, and so on. What of this is true and what is not, no one knows. If the enemy ambushes us, he must have a large force. There are too many of us. The firepower of our units is such that it is possible to turn this whole neighbourhood into ruins. January 22nd, 1967. Late last night arrived at the site, in the town of Mai Tho, about 30 miles southwest of Saigon. It is located on the bank of a broad river. We're resting. If you knew what kind of terrain it is: swamps, impenetrable jungle, mud and mosquitoes. Our main base, Sierra, is located on a huge drained and sand-filled rice field. The layer of sand is about 6 feet, I think. It's certainly better than a swamp. Our unit arrived here second. The enemy is said to have 2 regiments here, but so far he has not shown himself in any way. The rest of our division will arrive at the end of the month. We are glad that they will arrive because we are not familiar with the area, and the Pasha's transporters are moving here with difficulty. January 24th, 1967. The terrain here is such that only infantry can operate, so I think we will be out of here soon. A major has been sent to us with the task of determining the feasibility of using armoured personnel carriers in combat. So far, all the vehicles are stuck in the mud, so I imagine what his report on the matter will be. It's very hot and humid here. I made a deal with the mess sergeant. I'll supply him with photographic film, and he'll let me keep his films in the refrigerator in return. My father sends me more film than I can use. January 28th, 1967. We've been very busy the last 2 days, doing 2 firing missions to shell the Viet Cong. But instead of the enemy, we almost sent a squad of our own soldiers to the other side of the world. Our mortar salvo lay 40 metres away from them. Their forward observer asked for fire support, and a few minutes after that they were in more danger from their batteries than from enemy fire. Someone had made a miscalculation. The radio has just reported the startling news. 3 astronauts died this morning. We're stunned. Earlier in the day, 2 of our soldiers ran into a mine and were killed. There's hardly anything left of them to send back to the United States. Death all around. I'd love to get out of here, but I have to do my duty. We are told that it is our sacred duty, but I don't know everything, and no one really explains to us why we are here. At least no one explains it in a way that makes sense. Sometimes I wonder if we are helping the Vietnamese people, or if we are causing them grief and damage. If you have not seen poverty, come to Vietnam. Grissom, White and Chaffee deserve a lot of respect. They surely must have known that they might have to sacrifice themselves. January 29th, 1967. Sunday. Charlie is somewhere in the neighbourhood, and we know it. The enemy has us on alert for the entire 24 hours. Fire control is a tricky business. I sit at the mortar counter computer and determine the firing distance on a clipboard. The forward observer reports azimuth and coordinates on the map, then corrects our firing until we cover the target. Sometimes I get really scared. It's not pleasant knowing that someone else's life depends on you. You're supposed to think in mathematical terms at times like that, but I'm not really capable of it. Besides, mortars are inaccurate weapons. The high elevation angle of mortars contributes to the fact that the flying mine is affected by many variables, such as wind, strength, and direction. I pray all the time that I don't make a mistake. The chief operator of the calculating device, Zerman, is a good guy. He has taught me a lot and is confident in my abilities. The only good thing is that my duties keep me from going out on combat missions with the infantry rats. Got a letter from Mary Ann today. She wants me to go to Sweden after I get out of the army. It would be nice, of course, if I stay alive. They say that on February 21st we'll be involved in a big operation. Now we have already gained some combat experience and are ready for such an operation. January 31st, 1967. The work of a forward observer is one of the most difficult and hectic. He has to participate more often than others in patrolling areas, because every patrolling squad must have an observer, and we have only 3 forward observers for 6 squads. Conditions for him are unfavourable. Sergeant Paulson is in charge of the assignment. So far he's only picked Negroes and Puerto Ricans. I think he's trying to prove something to us. He always gives me a very angry look when I'm sitting at the calculator. As soon as he's in the neighbourhood, I'm overcome with regret that I wasn't born white. It's a bastardized position. If only blacks and Puerto Ricans could tell the world how they are treated in this damn army. All the hardest and baddest stuff goes to us. February 2nd, 1967. I had a good laugh the other day. When I was on watch at the radio station the day before yesterday, Sergeant Paulson had the idea of sneaking into the tent to catch me sleeping. I heard him sneaking and looked out of the tent. Paulson was still crawling on the ground. I realised he was trying to catch me, and I couldn't help but laugh out loud. Paulson was so embarrassed that he had no choice but to get up and walk away. What an asshole he is. Always telling me that Negroes are lazy and don't want to help each other, and all that kind of nonsense. I told him he was a fool. All the white folks around here are like that. But I still think some things will change now. Especially here, where everyone wants to survive. However, it doesn't seem to make any difference to Mr. White. All the Negroes in the platoon start complaining and grumbling, but I don't think it's enough. The platoon commander, Letty Alden, usually calls out to us Negroes, "Hey, you!" Zerman, this Jew from New York, doesn't seem happy about it either, but he's having a hard time himself. Sergeant Goulas turns where the wind blows. Sometimes he acts like a human being, but sometimes he treats us Negroes like dirty animals. What the hell is that? Maybe he's under pressure. Maybe 10 more months of this bastard service. These whites piss me off more than Charlie. I learned a lot here. Whites are good teachers. February 7th, 1967. Ominous omen. Paulson says I'm not processing the data for the firing squad fast enough. Got to get ready for non-transporter service. February 9th, 1967. flew from my good seat on an armoured personnel carrier. The fine Sergeant Paulson had struck another blow. He broke the news to me with a smile. I am now Forward Observer Parks assigned to the 1st Platoon Fire Control Armoured Personnel Carrier. When a combat mission is accomplished, our platoon gets off the armoured personnel carrier and pursues the Charlies on foot. I have to carry a damned radio telephone station with an antenna that presents an excellent target for the enemy. It's a sergeant's duty, but Paulson won't give me a promotion. He's a fucking bastard. February 12, 1967. This patrolling on the front line is a dangerous business indeed. You have to be brave and tough. Yesterday we had to walk 6 kilometres through rice paddies. I had a hell of a time, but I lost a little weight, which is good. Last 2 weeks our company was attached to an infantry battalion. It's bad when we're attached to someone because they do whatever they want to us. The infantry commander hates mechanised groups. He makes us get out of armoured personnel carriers for the most insignificant reasons. We've only been on 2 combat missions and we're tired as hell. Today the rest of our battalion arrived, they will replace us and we will rest a bit. It's likely we'll be assigned to roadblock duty in the near future. It's a fine job. All we have to do is keep the roads safe and keep the towns and villages open. There are also rumours that we may be sent to the Foxtrot base area to support an infantry battalion. Rumours, rumours, rumours. That's all the army lives on. February 13th, 1967. Sometimes curiosity is useful. Yesterday, just to pass the time, I was wandering around the company office and got into a conversation with a clerk about how to get out of here without going to the gub or being sent out on a stretcher. He looked up some manual, and we found an article in it which says, if a soldier has less than 90 days to serve, and if accepted by an officially recognised college, he may be discharged early so as to commence classes with his class. All that is required as proof is a letter of acceptance. So, I need a college that will write a letter saying I've been accepted. Informed my father of this. February 15th, 1967. Had to take cover from whizzing bullets several times today. And it wasn't easy. We were in a small town not far from Mytho. I'd built a reputation as a hero by doing a little shooting at Viet Cong snipers. I met a pretty girl. She promises to do my laundry every week. That's not bad, of course, but I'll pay her for it. February 18th, 1967. The rumours have come true. We are at Foxtrot Base and are back in small operations. It's tough here too. We are always anxious to push the Charlies back early, so we get up at 4:30 and move out. When our armoured personnel carriers move at this early hour, like some shapeless beasts in the pre-dawn gloom, it becomes eerie. Everything around seems distorted. With the beginning of February, the rainy season stops here. It is now hot and dry. Back home, there's probably already a lot of snow piled up. It's good for them out there. The snow gives food for thought. Received a charming Valentine's Day greeting and a love letter from a girl named Dee Dee. I don't know her. My father gave her my address. February 19th, 1967. We have had several people killed recently, mostly by sniper bullets. Most of the casualties are the result of the boys themselves being inconsiderate, not bothering to take shelter in unsafe neighbourhoods. We don't have anyone who follows this precaution in all cases, but I at least strive to do so. I do not disregard the experience of the last 2 months. One must always be on one's guard here. The day before yesterday, when bullets were whistling overhead, I was very afraid, but I restrained my feelings. I only once got out of cover unnecessarily. Luckily for me, the Charlies were not expecting the target to appear at that moment. I won't make that mistake again. So far, we leave the camp only for daytime operations and return to the base for the night. But I have heard that a major operation is being prepared south of Saigon, and we will not return to base for several days, perhaps even weeks. February 22, 1967. At about 2 o'clock this morning, the enemy attacked a village a few miles from the base. We quickly got into our vehicles and drove out, firing in all directions. But the enemy was expecting us and returned heavy fire. For some time, the situation was tense. Charlies resisted stubbornly and kept pressing on us, in spite of the fact that there were about 30 cars against them on our side. Shells, mines, and bullets were whistling all around. The noise was incredible. Everyone was shouting out some orders, which no one carried out. Squealing and crying, Vietnamese people were running. They fell to the ground every now and then, trying to cover their children. Some Vietnamese gathered in groups and stretched their hands to the heavens in silent prayer. I spent most of the time talking on a radio telephone to an armoured fire control vehicle. Then our white artilleryman was wounded in the arm. I replaced him at the gun and started firing at a tree where 3 snipers were sitting. I must have hit them. There was no more shooting from there. It even seemed funny to me, but only after the shooting stopped. The whole mess lasted about half an hour, but it seemed to me like a whole year had passed. February 24th, 1967. Yesterday was another combing operation. We were searching a strip of woods in what turned out to be a Viet Cong village. Charlie was not nearby, but there were families of enemy soldiers still in the village, so shelling the village with mortars was impossible. It was very hot, and we had to walk a lot, as it was impossible to get through on armoured personnel carriers. When we combed the village with loaded rifles, children would run to their mothers and cling to them crying. I no longer have the patience to wait for this bloody war to stop. Time is dragging by very slowly. Every day we are out searching to kill and kill and kill. If we don't find and kill anyone, frustration sets in. The deaths I witness on a daily basis are horrific. I hope that in time it will fade from my mind. February 26th, 1967. The comrades in my new armoured personnel carrier seem to be pretty good guys, except perhaps Sergeant Young. Lieutenant Viet and Driver Slepian are nice guys. There are 2 other Negroes in our crew, Gurney from Louisville and Sergeant Imori. Imori is teaching me the duties of the second forward observer. The other 3 guys, Sachs, Greenfield and Hickman, I don't know them properly yet. Sachs and Greenfield are just assigned to our transporter because the one they were on is out of commission. All of us are pretty cramped here. February 27th, 1967. This morning found another Viet Cong village hidden behind a strip of woods. The enemy had withdrawn from it, taking everything possible. Families, livestock, belongings. Charlie is cunning, however. Since the enemy soldiers may have hidden somewhere, we shelled and destroyed everything. Underground communication passages, trenches, houses. The ground shook from our shelling. It was like a carnival of madmen. Shrapnel flying around, jets of flamethrowers, burning buildings, birds flying away with a shrill cry. Akers almost shot me. His rifle bolt jammed in the automatic position, and he turned toward me. I barely had time to throw myself to the ground. Good thing he was out of ammo. It is hard to say who was more frightened, him or me. When we were withdrawing from the area, one of our armoured personnel carriers hit a mine. At that moment, my transporter was on the right, some 15 metres away. It was scary to see this huge monster leap into the air and fall apart. But the most amazing thing was that none of the transporter crew was killed. I share a tent with Sergeant Imori. He's always worried about his wife, from whom he hasn't heard for 3 months. He says she can't write often because she doesn't know how. The letters are written for her by her neighbours. I hope he will hear from her soon. I feel very sorry for him. It is hard and sad when you don't get letters for a long time. Some guys get whole stacks of them, and those who haven't received a single one walk around with sad faces. If only people back home knew how a few lines from them lift our mood, instantly change our condition. Today I'm avoiding Imori. He didn't get anything, and I have letters from Mary Ann, from Ziggy, my mother, a bag of chocolate briquettes with nuts, and another greeting from Dee Dee. She writes wonderfully. I hope Dee Dee will send me a picture of herself soon. I only got 2 briquettes. The guys surrounding me swallowed them all right away. I didn't mind. That's what happens to everyone who is stupid enough to open a package of candy in front of everyone. March 1st, 1967. I think I'm getting used to death, little by little. This morning we saw a man in his 40s when we were on patrol with a unit of the South Vietnamese Army. He was sitting in the woods. The South Vietnamese sergeant suspected it was a Viet Cong and started asking him questions, but the man jumped up and tried to run. The South Vietnamese sergeant shot him with a carbine. I don't think he even yelled at the man to stop. A carbine is a pretty accurate weapon. After a few seconds, the insides of the man hit by the shots began to fall out into the dirt on the ground, both of his legs literally severed by bullets. It was so horrible I couldn't move a finger. South Vietnamese soldiers are some kind of madmen. A man's life is worthless to them. I guess it's because they've been at war for a long time. As I ate canned food from my combat rations a few minutes later, as if nothing had happened, I had the thought that the same thing might happen to me. Nevertheless, I ate the whole can, March 2nd, 1967. Last night we were attacked by mines for the first time. The Charlies fired about 15 salvos at our camp. Each volley found its target. I was asleep when the first mine exploded. The ground shook from the explosion. I threw myself to the ground like a stunned man, and at the same time someone shouted, "We're being shelled!" Every now and then mines exploded in one place on the base. I was covered with cold sweat and prayed to God that they would all pass me by. Shrapnel whistled over our bunker, and I, unable to contain myself, trembled with fear like jelly. First there was a howl, then the dry sound of an explosion, then the whistle of steel shrapnel cleaving the air. The only thing we could do was return fire with 50mm guns and personal weapons. It was the most terrifying 10 minutes of my life. After 15 minutes, everything went silent, and we breathed a sigh of relief. Imori even started laughing, but I was in no condition to join him. Surprisingly, I fell asleep again pretty soon after that. It was the first opportunity in 10 days to get a good night's rest. Sergeant Goulas, of the crew of that transporter I had been on before, was seriously wounded. The headquarters was hit the hardest, but we don't know how many casualties there are yet. I'm not sure the local population is in favour of us. They smile at us during the day, but at night their sons shell us. It is very difficult to recognise the real enemy. March 4th, 1967. Today I turned 23 years old. I never imagined that in my 23rd year of life I would have to be in such a disgusting place. I am all soaked in grey liquid mud from the rice fields. I haven't bathed in days. We were on an operation to find the enemy in the Tanan area, about 20 miles southwest of Saigon. The Charlies are all over the place. Yesterday they shelled us from the woods. We returned fire with 50mm guns and killed about 40 enemy soldiers. In the afternoon the corpses were exposed to the sunlight and there was a terrible stench all around. The next 7 or 8 days would be hot for us, March 7th, 1967. Today again, combing the terrain and searching for the enemy. We located it, but the armoured personnel carriers couldn't get through there. We got out of the vehicles near the woods and the commander ordered us to comb it. From fear I was sweating all the time. Our squad took up a position in a hut that was in the middle part of the forest. The rest of the company's squads returned to the transporters to keep the enemy from moving away. Lot Wyatt ordered us to stay at the observation post in the hut. We began to wait. I had already started to determine the firing distance on my clipboard, but Wyeth saw the Viet Cong at that moment and opened fire on them with an M16 rifle. As he did so, he yelled, "Shoot them! Shoot them!" I crouched down on the floor and started calling for company, and the Charlies returned fire at that point. Thank God they didn't shoot very accurately. Most of the bullets flew over our heads. The armoured personnel carriers opened fire after about 3 minutes, and the Charlies retreated, but we managed to kill 2 of their soldiers. When we were counting the dead, Sergeant Young kicked the body of a Viet Cong to make sure he was killed. There was no way he was alive. The bullets had penetrated him from head to toe. Yang asked me for a knife. I gave him the knife and saw him cut off the corpse's finger and take off his gold ring. I quickly stepped aside without even waiting for Yang to return my knife. I was sick to my stomach. March 11th, 1967. Uncle Sam was a few days late with my birthday present, but I did get it today here at Purple Heart Hospital. On March 7th, our armoured personnel carrier hit a mine. I was the only one wounded. Some of the men got minor burns, though. We were travelling at about 30 miles an hour. I was sitting on top of the back of the car. Suddenly there was an explosion and the transporter jumped up. Then I remember I was enveloped in a cloud of thick dust and dirt. I lost consciousness. When I came to, I saw that I was lying on the floor of the transporter. Imori was examining me from all sides and kept asking me how I was feeling. I asked him what had happened. He replied that we had hit a mine. Then my mind went blank again. Soon I felt myself being lifted up, with a terrible headache. I felt my head with my hand, and there was a lump on it the size of a golf ball. They turned my head on its side, and I felt something running down my neck. It was blood. The shrapnel had hit me in the forehead above my left eye. It happened so fast that I didn't have time to be frightened. I thanked God that I was alive. In the afternoon I was taken to Sierra to the hospital. That same night the Charlies fired mines at the base. I wondered if they were after me personally. I wonder if the commanders report cases like mine to their relatives. I hope not, because such a report would only alarm them in vain. I shall return to my unit, according to the doctor, as soon as my head is put in order. I should get to serve in medical units. Nothing hard or bad here, but there are good-looking nurses all around. Got another letter from Dee. Very nice. March 13th, 1967. I'm back in my unit. Saw Christensen today. He's in a lousy mood. Paulson took him off as a driver and put him as a forward observer. In the meantime, we have a new commander. Ours was transferred to Battalion HQ, Captain Thomas. He's not a bad guy, but he seems to be from the upper class. March 19th, 1967. At times, the Charlies get desperate or go crazy. The previous day they had fired on us from the woods, but it turned out badly for them. The commander ordered us to counterattack, and all 20 armoured personnel carriers began to pursue the enemy. I gained even more respect for some of the guys in our unit. Take Greenfield, for instance. So he's a real quiet guy, but if you look at him when bullets are whizzing around and he's wielding a 50mm gun without paying attention to them, you'll think he's a man of steel. Christensen was a great driver, but Slepiap was just as good. He was as nimble as if he had been in the jungle all his life. Sachs transmitted 3 radiograms at a time, while I maintained the radio telephone linking us with the unit commander. When the armoured personnel carriers could no longer advance in the jungle, the commander ordered some of us to get out of the vehicles and pursue the enemy on foot. It was a terrible hell. The space around was literally swarming with bullets and mines. Some of the guys were wounded, but the medics immediately ran up to them and, putting themselves in danger, rendered assistance. March 21st, 1967. Since the 15th, I have been in the hospital again. It's my head again. Frequent bouts of vertigo and large cysts on my forehead. I hope I don't have to suffer like last time. X-rays showed no brain damage. When I arrived, the doctor, if you can call him that, opened up the cysts and left me lying on a blood-drenched bunk. He gave me nothing for the dizziness, just told me to rest and go back to my unit. He says I have a mild neurosis. Damn it, how long can a neurosis last? The next morning the wound festered, and I had to lie on a dirty bunk for 2 more days without any medical attention. Still no room for me in the ward. I tried to get up and walk around, but when I got up I felt dizzy and had to sit down again. I complained a few times, but each time I was turned away. On the 4th day, I just grabbed the doctor's hand and pointed to my head, Pus was oozing out of the wound. "What the hell else do you need?" he asked. It made me so angry I was ready to wring his neck. He cleaned and irrigated my wound, causing a hell of a lot of pain. The corpsman there on the battlefield treated me better. March 23rd, 1967. I am back in my company, which is south of Saigon. They say I missed a lot of fighting. Our platoon leader Let Alden died. Poor Sleepyan suffered the same fate. I'm gonna miss that guy. Sleepyan was a hell of a driver and his own guy, but a little too reckless. Maybe that's why he took a bullet. There are thousands of refugees in the camps along our route. They live in hastily built huts made of scrap boards and crumpled tin. These poor people are really suffering. Yesterday we burned down a village. Everything disappeared in flames in a matter of minutes. The military drives the affected people to refugee camps, sometimes to new villages, but this is very rare. In any case, they have to start all over again as they have lost their rice fields, chickens and pets forever. I have heard that some young girls go to Saigon and become prostitutes there to help their families get a new household. March 28, 1967. Just got back from Operation Junction City, in which we were used as blocking units. It was a total experience. One infantry division had pushed the Viet Cong southward, just into the area where our armoured personnel carriers were. We were just waiting for that and, since the enemy came right at us, mowed them down. After that, everyone was very cheerful and drank a lot of beer, but I felt a bit uncomfortable. Death is death, no matter who dies. The other day, Imori's grandmother died. He took it hard, as he loved her very much. For some reason, the command allowed him to go home for the funeral. Strange, I thought. A guy goes 1,000 miles away to see a dead person for the last time, and there are dead people lying around in piles. I heard from my father today. He and the rest of our family are living well. It will be many more months and many more bullets will whiz over my head before I see them again. On days like today, I often think that I may never see them again. I must be transferred to the 17th Company. I have no doubt that Sergeant Paulson wants to get rid of me because the Viet Cong still haven't finished me off, even though I'm a forward observer. That's even better for me. I'm tired of being dragged around on foot with those infantry rats. It's a lousy job. You never know if you're going to make it back. Sometimes it takes forever before someone responds to our request for support and starts firing mortars. The request has to go through too many instances before it is granted. Sometimes the Charlies have time to pull back before ours are authorized to fire. They have to contact Air Command, Ground Command and the South Vietnamese Army before they can fire a single shot. What is this war all about after all? It is said that we have more firepower here than we had in World Wars I and II combined. Yet the Viet Cong continue to hang on. I can't understand it. Each one of them must live and die 40 times. It's 41 degrees today. It's hot and sweltering. April 3rd, 1967. Just got back from a 5-day operation in which we killed and captured many Viet Cong. Most of them were caught in our ambushes. The operation went pretty smoothly. Our company would sweep the area where we knew the Charlies were hiding, then we would pull back, leaving a squad in ambush. Then, when we, the forward observers, noticed that the Charlies were coming out of their hiding places, we would signal the company and the company would press on until we received mortar support. A few of our guys were killed. When the Charlies are backed up against the wall, they fight like hell. I haven't been taking a lot of pictures lately. The Charlies keep us in suspense all the time and it's hard to shoot during combat. I'm doing forward observer duties and I'm not really in the mood to click my camera. I'll have to send some footage to my father and have him write to let him know if I'm using the right shutter speed. April 4th, 1967. Just learned that our company has been suspended for 2 days from combat operations. This is not surprising. We drove through several towns with 5 dead Viet Cong tied to our armoured personnel carriers. This is, I believe, revenge for our soldiers killed yesterday. The Vietnamese looked on in horror. But to blame them would be unfair. It was a terrible sight, bloody corpses, greying from the heat and dirt of the rice paddies. Some of our guys had abused and mutilated the bodies of the Viet Cong. I saw Sergeant Young wearing a pair of dried ears of a dead Viet Cong strung around his neck. I've heard of other soldiers even cutting off the genitals of Viet Cong. I, thank God, never had to see it. High Command ordered our company out of the area. It seems the peasants complained that the company was looting and burning their houses. And they were often absolutely right. Dead bodies hitched to transporters don't help us in any way. We are now in our battalion at Base Camp Bravo. Base Camp, while we're under investigation. The mood in the company is the lousiest. We'd rather be out looking for Charlies right now than sitting here in camp. Most of us are cursing those few guys for putting us in harm's way. But we're soldiers in the same company. Until this is over, there's nothing left for us to do but stand guard, drink beer, and reap the fruits of our deeds. Many guys are fiddling with their armoured personnel carriers as if they were their own vehicles. They put additional weapons on them, draw pictures on the sides. One transporter even got rubber shields from mud. Plenty of time to wash up and write letters. All in all, it wouldn't be so bad if we didn't have this case hanging over us. Just now learned that my old infantry unit has lost 80% of its complement. I wonder how Cha-Cha and Ashworth are doing. Also heard that my new platoon leader, a lieutenant from North Carolina, made an elderly woman crawl through the mud by threatening her with a gun pointed at her head. The guy seems like a tough guy. He likes to keep records of how many people he's killed. Imori says he got really mad at that old woman because she refused to answer questions about the Viet Cong. April 5th, 1967. This morning during breakfast, a general from headquarters arrived by helicopter and trashed Captain Thomas in front of everyone. He called us a bunch of thieves and untrained dogs, and said that if Thomas didn't mooch off us properly, he would be demoted. To tell the truth, it was a funny sight to see our commander standing at attention, repeating, "Yes, sir, no, sir, you're right, sir." It was a real blow to me, though I tried not to show it. He's the one who's supposed to write me a recommendation for the Institute. Now, to make things right, Thomas is going to eat us to death. But I'll try to stay out of it. April 6th, 1967. Greenfield was killed today. It was the first day of Operation Hammer, a search and destroy operation. 2 photojournalists, one from the Columbia Broadcasting Company and one from the National Broadcasting Company, were travelling with us. There was silence. We rumbled along the edge of the woods that separated us from the shallow river. Greenfield sat to my left, just behind the driver. Suddenly 2 bullets whistled overhead. We crawled across the roof of the armoured personnel carrier and jumped through the hatch. Our heads towered above the hatch. I called the mortar platoon commander and reported that we were being shelled by snipers. But, as always, there were helicopters hovering over us, so the mortars could not fire. Far from the rear was firing artillery. We opened fire with 50mm and 60mm guns. I heard Thomas order a ceasefire, and the guns fell silent. The snipers started firing at us again. There was a crunching sound to my left. I turned just as blood spurted from a hole in Greenfield's helmet. He'd been hit, and he was slumped over on the bottom of the armoured truck. I jumped down after Greenfield, but Lieutenant Viet was already beside him. He was trying to get a bandage and apply it to stop the bleeding. When Greenfield began choking on his own blood, Wyeth put his fingers in his mouth so the blood could flow out unimpeded. "Hold on, Greenfield, hold on. It's going to be all right," he reassured the poor man. Greenfield moved his head. Our guns began shelling the woods again. I asked Thomas to send a helicopter for Greenfield. He replied that the helicopter had already left to pick up the 3rd platoon leader, who was also wounded. A medic from another armoured personnel carrier came running over to give Greenfield first aid. He tried to open the morphine jar with the key, but it broke. Oh, shit. He tried to pry the lid off with his bare hands, but cut his fingers. Now his blood was everywhere. Sachs, who was nearly nauseous, muttered, He's dead, guys, he's dead. The helicopters were closing in, firing into the forest floor. Our guns were firing at maximum rate of fire. We pulled Greenfield toward the helicopter. The corpsman went with him. I knew it was the last time I would see Greenfield. No man could have survived with a wound like that. Another good guy had died. I jumped back on the transporter, and Viet ordered us to scour the area, moving toward the woods. The photojournalists wanted to get off, but we couldn't stop. Our car was heading toward the river. The guy from the national broadcaster called for a helicopter to pick them up, but the one from the Columbia Broadcasting Company wanted to stay with us. The helicopter arrived, but the Viet Cong opened fire on it. To top it off, the men near the helicopter ran into a Minuteman. The Viet Cong started literally pouring lead on us. Bullets were whizzing everywhere. It seemed to me that a photojournalist from a national broadcasting company had been wounded. On my radio frequency came a voice from a reconnaissance plane. The pilots were reporting that they had seen about 50 Charlies running out of the woods 500 meters east of us. They were in a rice paddy and were running toward the river. Viet ordered us to get out of our vehicles and pursue the Charlies on foot, firing as we went. When we started firing at the river, there were about 15 Charlies in the river, hiding in the reeds. We shot them over like ducklings. I killed the third man on the count. That's how it all happened. That's a good start to the operation. Poor Greenfield. Just a few inches to the left and I'd be a dead man. Maybe tomorrow it'll be my turn. Who knows? Just yesterday he was talking about the girl he was going to marry when he got home. He was a simple guy. He wanted to be a carpenter. Today he's tired as a dog and in a bad mood. This operation will last another 2 weeks at the most. When will it be over? April 10th, 1967. The Charlies interrupted our breakfast this morning. They opened fire on the helicopter that is delivering our food. Thomas ordered us to take our places in the armoured personnel carriers, and we moved in the direction the snipers were firing from. We caught up with 4 Charlies in the open and threw hand grenades at them. They headed towards the river, but of course they did not reach it. We mowed them down and went on looking for the others. Suddenly 2 more Viet Cong came out of the bushes, and I fired my M16 at them. Then Sachs took aim at some object moving underwater. It was a Viet Cong man. When he appeared above the water to take a breath of air, Sachs put a full clip of 30 rounds into him. It was unbelievable. The Viet Cong should have died. The water around him reddened with blood. But he turned and held out his hands to us, begging for mercy. Sachs silenced him for good by discharging a second clip into the poor guy. On the way back, we found one of those who had been hit by a shell from our 50mm gun. One of his legs had been blown off, but he was still cowering in the mud. Gurney, who was sitting on the transporter, wanted to finish him off with a 50mm gun, but Thomas said, "Hold on, I'll do it myself." He took out his gun and discharged it into the wounded man's head. He tried to get up, but immediately fell dead to the ground. I was tired to death of this nightmare. April 15th, 1967. Back at Bravo Base Camp near the Delta. The result of our operation is about 300 dead and an unknown number of wounded and unaccounted for. The Viet Cong are hard to destroy. If it weren't for armoured personnel carriers, it would be simply impossible. Our next operation will be in Cane Valley. We've been there before. Transporters can't go over swampy ground. We'll be flown there by airplane or helicopter. Got an email from my buddy Johnny Shearer. He goes to Rochester Institute of Technology and thinks I could go there. He writes that my dad is doing something about it. I hope I'll be lucky and get in. Charlie is not showing today, but still I am dead tired again. April 20, 1967. Just got back from Cane Valley. Travelled a long way through mud and water, but no enemy was detected. While we were waiting for helicopters to take us to the armoured personnel carriers, Hickman saw an enemy grenade on the ground and walked over to it. I yelled to him, "You better leave that devil thing alone." But he did not listen and picked up the grenade. The thing suddenly exploded, and Hickman fell to the ground. As the poor fellow tried to get up, he yelled at the top of his voice, "My arm! My God! I haven't got an arm!" We ran up and put a tourniquet on him, trying to stop the bleeding until the doctor arrived. Hickman cried like a baby and begged us to find his arm. "Oh my God, I can't go home like this. How am I going to drive?" We pretended to look, though we knew full well we would find nothing, for the brush had been torn to pieces. I don't know why that fool had to pick up a grenade from the ground. Well, now he will go home, and all the guys from our armoured personnel carrier gathered in my tent and got drunk as hell. I think I'll go join them. April 24th, 1967. Went to Saigon for 3 days to visit the doctor with my head. Gosh, what a place. So many beautiful women. Soldiers living the good life. Visited several nightclubs and had some great Vietnamese ethnic food. It was an extraordinary evening. The guys who serve there, they live happily ever after. They even like the fact that the war lasts so long. Neither officers nor NCOs would trade the life they lead there for anything. Saigon is filled with a lot of young men scooting everywhere on mopeds. I wonder why they are over there instead of fighting here with us. April 26th, 1967. Stayed in the area of Rach Kien for 2 days. No fighting, just combed the area and moved back. Heard that the 3rd platoon came under fire last night. He was searching for the enemy on his own. 1 guy was killed, 3 wounded. Hopefully they'll be okay. This time the enemy was more cunning than us. I'll need a letter from my folks to get a vacation, rest and fun. April is winding down. The monsoon period is approaching. May 5th, 1967. Just got a letter from Dee Dee. She writes that my father is still trying to get me into the Rochester Institute of Technology. He gave 1 lecture there and they kind of owe him. Maybe father will get some weight there. It's a good school. I've asked Dee Dee to help me. Dad's too slow in these things. I'll have to send her all the admission papers. May 8th, 1967. I'm in the hospital again. Same case, shrapnel wound to the head. The tumour is getting bigger and bigger, and the doctors open it from time to time. My God, you see a lot of things in this hospital. 1 guy came in so badly wounded he tried to kill himself. I held him down until the doctor gave him a shot. In the morning, one of the South Vietnamese army came in. His leg had been blown off. He'd bled all over the floor. The Vietnamese didn't say anything or moan, probably thinking about where to get another leg. I hope I don't have to go through that kind of agony. The rainy season has begun. They say it's going to rain non-stop for 4 months straight. Our company is building a temporary base in Cane Valley with the construction team. It's all flooded now. After that, we will have only guard duty and patrols. May 15th, 1967. I've been thinking a lot lately about the people I love, the war, women and more. Frankly, I'm confused. The news from the States has me dumbfounded. On the one hand, Stokely Carmichael says Negroes shouldn't fight for this country. On the other hand, some of the Negro leaders think just the opposite. I'm sure most of them have never smelled gunpowder. But I know what war is, and I know I've had enough of it. Here in the war, I realized I was wrong about a lot of things. My father was right when he repeatedly said to me, "Oh boy, I guess you'll have a hard time learning about life. If I ever get out of here in one piece, I'll be a different person. If you want to get something out of life, you have to grab it with both hands and hold on, don't let go. Before, when I was in school, I didn't realize that. Now I am passionate about life, and no matter what gets in my way, I will achieve it. I think I will go back to the guys tomorrow." May 17, 1967. I'm back in my company. It's hot. We are on the road again. We are hurrying to the place of tomorrow's operation. I don't know which place it is. We may have to leave the transporters and dismount because it's muddy and marshy. The jeeps are having a hard time getting on the roads. I never realized the rains could cause so much trouble and inconvenience. New guys are arriving all the time, and the old ones are either killed or transferred to other units. You don't even have time to get acquainted. Some of our guys are transferred to the 273rd Infantry Brigade, and their soldiers came to us. The 273rd Brigade got here 5 months later than our division, and this exchange will help our unit keep our numbers up before our 1-year term is up. I won't be transferred because I've already been transferred once. A second transfer is a violation of the rules. May 18th, 1967. Passmore, the radio-telephone operator of our company commander, told me that he was looking for another radio-telephone operator. He needed 2. Without thinking long, I asked Thomas if I could be sent to fill the position. He replied in the affirmative and promised to try to promote me. That's great. I'm sick to death of being a frontline observer. It's a lousy job going on night patrols and sitting in ambush. And now I'm on the company commander's armoured personnel carrier. A lot of people don't like that. A Negro can't know the secrets of headquarters. I worked hard to get this place, so to hell with anybody who doesn't like it. Now I don't get sent to work and I don't have to be on duty. Radiograms are transmitted 24 hours a day, so Passmore or I don't get away from the receivers for a minute. The sergeants who used to kick me around are more respectful now, afraid I'd report them. Of course, I would never do that, and even if I did, the unit commander wouldn't take any action anyway. Passmore is really working for 2. He is on watch at the radio station and sucking up to the company commander. We're at Camp Bravo now, but it won't be for long. Something is being prepared. May 21st, 1967. Just got back from a real scorcher. We stood at the ready for 2 days while the infantry scoured the area and searched for the enemy. Finally, it attacked the Charlies, but this time they did not think of retreating but counter-attacked. We had to intervene our armoured personnel carriers, and we really gave them heat. When we arrived, the position of the infantry units was critical. They were already exhausted. They only had M16 rifles and pistols. It was the hottest battle of our division's units in the Mekong Delta. Almost all 30 of our armoured personnel carriers participated. We literally showered everything around us with our shells. We overcame a strip of slippery mud, came to the Viet Cong defences, and defeated them. Soon the Charlies began to retreat. Of our guys, 19 were killed, 46 wounded. But we also killed about 200 Charlies. The main blow was taken by the 2nd Company of the 4th Battalion of the 48th Infantry Regiment. But in the battle had to enter and pilots, and the 450th Artillery Regiment, and our armoured personnel carriers. Charlie achieved a few hits with recoilless gun shells in our armoured personnel carriers. It's no big deal. The war is really in full swing now. Rumour has it that we may launch ground offensives in North Vietnam. That would mean we'd have to serve not 1 but 4 years. That's a crazy thought. There's nothing from the Institute. I wish they'd send me some kind of answer. Yes, no, or even maybe. I've got 6 more months of service ahead of me. Where the hell are the letters from home? May 25, 1967. It's raining, and everything is kind of at a standstill. Camp Bravo is flooded with almost 3 feet of water. Sometimes I'd rather be on the front lines than sit and listen to these officers. They talk non-stop and brag about their victories, either on the battlefield or over women. Sometimes they act like children, wanting someone to listen to their chatter. And in such cases, if you don't want to be sent to the front line, you have to listen to them, agree and act happy. The only way to avoid these stories is to lie silently somewhere aside. If you show them the slightest glimmer of intelligence, you're gone. Especially if you're a Negro. Pratt and Gurney are pretty smart Negroes, but whenever you meet them, they're always doing some dirty work, while the white guys are lying on their bunks enjoying life. The 2 white guys were so ashamed that they went to the company commander today and complained about Pratt and Gurney being assigned to dirty work all the time. I hope it will do some good, but I don't think so. Sergeant Paulson is in charge of assignments. Captain Thomas is a smart officer and almost always treats me well, probably because I'm his radio-telephone operator. but sometimes he gets out of hand. I made the mistake of showing him a newspaper clipping Dee sent me once. It was about Martin Luther King's condemnation of the war. "King thinks he's God knows who," Thomas shouted. "He's won the Nobel Prize, and now he thinks he can rule the world." And he continued in the same vein, trashing King. I said I thought Dr. King was a man who fought for justice for all people. I said that, and then I realized I had to shut my big mouth because I had no desire to go on night watch. June 6th, 1967. Yay! Got a letter from Ken Gilman. Liz told him that I was accepted to Rochester Institute of Technology. I hope it's true. Why doesn't my father write about it? For the last 10 days we've been operating in the Tan An area, a little south of Saigon. We killed 2 men the other day. It's a picture that will be hard to forget. Charlie was spotted by helicopters just as they were trying to get away. Machine gunners riddled them with bullets, and we finished them off with 50mm guns. The men were turned into a bloody mess of raw meat and mud. Not a pretty picture. Passmore, the second radio telephonist, began to vomit and got a kick out of the commander. It's been 6 months and he still can't get used to it. I didn't throw up, but I still couldn't eat lunch after that scene. June 8th, 1967. Yes, it's true. I was accepted. I received 2 letters this morning. One from Rochester Institute of Technology, the other from my father. The fact that I've been accepted will get me out of here 80 days early. I can't wait. Damn tired of living in the mud, following orders, and listening to being called names by every ranking petty officer. Paulson enjoys insulting Negro soldiers. I'm just sure of it. Pratt hates him. Look, one of these days I'm going to air and stick that son of a bitch instead of Charlie, he told me when he was sent out on night patrol for the 3rd time in a row. I've been on 250 missions and participated in more than 25 major operations. That's enough for a full tour of duty. There's a rumour we're going to be sent to the DMZ. I hope that's not true. But they might. We killed a lot of Viet Cong in the Mekong Delta area. We've had a lot of hot fights. Some peasants think we're killing civilians. This is one of the main tragedies of war. A lot of innocent people are killed or maimed. Some guys allow themselves to rape women and even brag about it. The other day, a Negro, Jones, who recently came to us, killed a civilian in front of his 3 children. We took this man into custody because he had no identification. We drove him and his wife and children into a hut and waited for the local police to arrive to identify him. The man tried to leave the hut twice, but each time Jones shouted at him and brought him back. We had a bite of bread and lard while we waited for the police to arrive, and then I went outside and took a nap against the wall. Suddenly, shots from an M16 sounded very close by. It was so close that I thought I'd been shot. I rushed over to Jones and saw him standing next to a Vietnamese man lying on the floor who was trying to get up. Blood was gushing from the Vietnamese man's back. Jones, all wet and shaking, stood beside him. Jones said that when the Vietnamese man ran toward the door, he had to shoot him. The children were crying loudly, clinging to each other, and the wife knelt beside the dead man and wailed in a terrible voice. A doctor came and tried to save the man, but his intervention was useless. The Vietnamese man died. By the way, I noticed how the doctor shook his head bitterly. Soon, the local police arrived and said that the man had nothing to do with the Viet Cong. Too bad they hadn't arrived a little earlier. Late that night, the Vietnamese man's wife filed a complaint against us with the local authorities. The morning the military police arrived to investigate the matter. The commander of the unit told Jones not to worry as he was only carrying out his duties. I still can't understand why this guy was so eager to escape from the cabin. The worst part is that if we had tied him up, which we were obligated to do, he would not have tried to sneak out and in that case would still be alive. The only reason we didn't tie the guy up was because of the presence of his loved ones. We thought it would be hard for them to see it. I think about his kids all the time. They're going to hate us their whole lives, and who's going to judge them for that? June 12th, 1967. Just finished 2 days of airmobile operations. Our armoured personnel carriers are idle because of the monsoon rains. You look at the mud and it looks like it goes a mile deep. When you approach the battlefield in a helicopter, it feels like hell. As we approach the combat zone, the helicopters fire all their guns and machine guns at full power to prepare the place for our landing. I can never get used to the rumble we make. There is so much noise all around that you never know if the Charlies are returning fire. When you jump to the ground, the blood rushes to your head, and you pray to God that the Charlies don't start shooting at you with a machine gun or automatic rifle. Once on the ground, we run as fast as we can to the nearest ditch, praying to God that we don't run into booby traps or steel spikes covered in poison or buffalo dung. Once everyone is sorted out and in position, we start combing the area. We've been on 17 of these sorties. 8 more sorties and we will receive a medal for participation in airmobile operations. Mechanized units have to work their arses off to get an award like that. Jones got stuck in a swamp in a rice paddy during one of these operations. He was pulled out of there by helicopter. I wonder what happened to him. June 13th, 1967. Watched a movie last night, which is quite rare here, but toward the end of the movie, snipers started firing at us, aiming at the beam of the movie camera. They were shooting from all sides, from the right and left, so I rushed as fast as I could to the column of armoured personnel carriers. There was nobody there but Gurney, scared to death. This guy was so scared that he started firing his gun right through the awning. I said to him, "What are you shooting at? You can't see anything." And he said, "You're right, friend, but if the Charlies hear you shooting from here, they'll think twice before they come in here." So I said to this fool, "Look, the Charlies aren't in the base, they're somewhere off the base." And he said, "Well, so what if they're off base, but they won't come here?" I had to calm Gurney down, or he could have killed me or somebody else. After we had recovered a little, a reconnaissance company was sent out to look for enemy snipers. One soldier of this company got too far ahead and was killed by mistake. The Viet Cong hid in some village, and 15 civilians were killed in the firefight. There was such confusion that it was impossible to judge whose bullets killed them, whether from ours or from the Viet Cong. There were so many random mistakes and misunderstandings. This case left a very heavy impression on me. June 14th, 1967. If I am not discharged in early September, I will probably end up in the demilitarized zone. Until recently there were rumours about this, but now it has come to light that it is true. The battalion will be transferred there because our combat successes are regarded very highly. They say we're the best in the division. That's what they're giving us in return for all our efforts. Talked to a guy who just came from there, from the DMZ. Says he wouldn't go back there for anything. June 28th, 1967. There's no living from mines this month. Yesterday, for example, the armoured personnel carrier I usually drive hit a 500-pound mine. We were about 100 yards behind when an explosion went off and a column of black smoke billowed upward. The big armoured personnel carrier was tossed around like a toy. When we ran up, we saw that Gurney and Sachs had been crushed by the mangled armoured truck. Young and Hoffmaster had to be pieced together. It was hard to believe they were no longer alive. All the other guys in the armoured truck were injured. I can't wait for the day I get out of here. The less time I have left to wait, the harder it gets. I live with only one hope that I will endure all this. June 30th, 1967. Sachs and Gurney just won't get out of my head. They're both really nice guys. Gurney is a quiet and good-looking Negro, originally from Kentucky. He and I set up a day to meet and wander around New York City together. Sachs is a white guy from Delaware. He was always talking about his girlfriend, who wrote to him 3 or 4 times a week. He and Gripfield were particularly good friends of mine. A painful end befell them both. July 4th, 1967. Yesterday again participated in a helicopter operation, but no enemy was detected. When we were dropped off on the ground, the armed helicopters fired so close to us that they wounded 2 men, Diaz and Harris, who had only 26 days left to serve. Diaz, a Mexican, was hit in the shoulder. They were both lying in the mud, and Diaz kept asking us to help Harris. Poor Harris was thrashing around in a big pool of blood. A few minutes later, he was dead. Seems like the guys who don't have much left to serve are the ones who die. I'm waiting my turn too. July 7th, 1967. This night we were shelled with mortars and machine guns. This is the 3rd time in the last 2 weeks. Dolly, another one who has almost served his full term, was wounded in the arm, but I think he will get better soon. I would really hate to ever be involved in a war like this again. July 13th, 1967. Just got back from an operation we had on the river. It was a boat ride upstream, and it took 4 hours total. 3 guys ran into booby traps, but only 1 rookie Barton was killed. We arrived in the area to pick up 3 Viet Cong who had reported voluntarily surrendering as prisoners. When we picked them up, they reported that there were over 100 Viet Cong in the wooded area. Captain Thomas immediately decided how to proceed. He, Passmore and I were to march toward the woods following the Viet Cong prisoners. Thomas gave the command to go, but no one moved. It felt like the Charlies were lurking in the woods waiting for us to get closer. No one wanted to see if that was the case. Thomas repeated the order. Again, no one moved. Then the captain raised his rifle and pointed it at us. "What the hell is that?" he shouted. "Come on, get a move on. Passmore, Parks, to the woods. March." We started slowly forward, the others following us. I couldn't help but admire this man's bravery, but as we scoured the forest, I cursed him at every turn. If there had been a single Charlie in the woods, he would surely have taken us at gunpoint. But we found not a living soul. For the rest of the day, Passmore berated Thomas, calling him an ass, imagining himself a war hero. He said this, of course, in the absence of the captain. July 18th, 1967. I hardly slept at all this night. I feel that I don't have much time left to live. At times, I think that it would be better to be killed at once than to be crippled. It would be unbearable for me to waddle the rest of my life on 1 leg or no legs at all. I'll get a short vacation soon. The sooner the better. The most I have ahead of me is 1 more operation. July 23rd, 1967. Only about 30 days left. Thomas says we'll be in operations until the end of September. It seems to me that we have a big manpower shortage, as many of our guys are being transferred either to the 273rd Infantry Brigade in the DMZ or to the 7th Reconnaissance Training Regiment north of Saigon. I hope Uncle Sam knows what he's doing. July 24th, 1967. A strange change happened to our company commander. He suddenly considers himself a champion Charlie killer, always bragging about it and making fun of the men he's killed. I've always respected him more than other officers, and when he's had a hard time, I've tried to help him. Sometimes he can be friendly to me, but most of the time he looks at me like a lackey. A couple weeks ago, we were sitting in a rice paddy waiting for orders. Out of the blue, he decided to practice firing his gun. He made me run like a boy for half an hour through the mud and set up empty tin boxes of combat rations as targets for him. The other day, he dropped his gun in the mud and ordered me to pick it up. I know he thought I'd clean it, but I gave him the gun and walked away. Oh, he was mad. Let Passmore clean it. It's his job. And so it was. Passmore had to clean the gun. I've done too much dirty work before to clean up after Thomas. Just got orders for an operation tomorrow. It would be a 3-day operation and my 23rd helicopter sortie. The monsoon rains keep coming. I miss our armoured personnel carriers. August 1st, 1967. We are in Operation Lansing. Our mission is to clear the enemy from Highway 4 connecting the Mekong Delta to the capital. 2 days ago, the Charlies woke us up at 2 o'clock in the morning and gave us a thrashing like we have never seen before. It's been going on ever since. We were supposed to take action against them in a few hours, but the Charlies took us by surprise. They fired rockets, mines, and everything in their arsenal at us. Raiding each other in the darkness, we rushed around looking for who had weapons to kill ourselves and who had safe shelter. Finally, we sorted out our armoured personnel carriers and drove out of the base camp area. At this point, it suddenly occurred to me that this would be my last operation. I thought of Harris, Gurney, and the others who were days away from the end, and prayed that I would not be their fate. We had already arrived in the war zone, and I kept praying. I prayed, and trying my best to keep my presence of mind, went over in my mind all the battles and campaigns I had been through. We had already called for helicopters when we received a message from the landing zone that the enemy was attacking the unit there. Thomas ordered us to dismount, and we began to move to their aid. Bullets were whizzing over us in different directions, and we could not tell where they were coming from. We crawled and fired at the same time, trying not to be hit by our own bullets. I was deeply grateful to those who had taught us to crawl during our training at Fort Riley. The situation of the unit that was in the landing area became so dire that Thomas decided to take the shortest route straight through the swamp. The liquid mud was up to our waists, but we continued to wade and fire as we went. Suddenly I felt myself sinking into the mire. I tried several times to get out, but I was dragged deeper and deeper. I was already behind everyone. The guys were approaching the forest and were shelling it. It was useless to call for help. No one would have heard me anyway. The enemy kept on firing a barrage. I felt a terrible fatigue, so strong that even fear was gone. I thought it was the end. My hour had come. But then, slapping the mud, someone approached me. It was Sergeant Paulson. That degenerate seemed like an angel this time. Teasing me, he held out his rifle and helped me out of the mire, and then we both dragged ourselves forward again. By dawn, we had the Viet Cong surrounded, but they would not surrender. There were about 2,000 of them in the area, and they continued to fight all day. In the evening, the enemy attempted to break out of the encirclement by throwing a company into a counterattack. Over the territory where the enemy company was located, an air ambulance helicopter designed to evacuate the wounded was shot down. 10 guys who tried to save the vehicle died. The Viet Cong knew they had a chance to break through the encirclement, but our artillery prevented them from doing so. All night long we heard artillery units shelling the roads where the Viet Cong were retreating. The enemy broke through in one place, but he could not get away. We pursued him on his heels, but the Charlies had the advantage of knowing their country well. They know many places in which to hide. August 3rd, 1967. I'm tired, dead tired. Captain Thomas is ready to end this mess, but the High Command has other plans for us. They're sending us to another area where there may be an enemy. They think there's a Charlie hiding somewhere. I wish those Charlies would leave us alone and go home. Then they'd let me go on a short vacation. I've got to take it sometime. Right now we are just sitting in our defensive positions. August 4th, 1967. Yesterday participated in an air raid and spotted the enemy. The Viet Cong were taking up defensive positions in a wooded area. Upon landing, we linked up with a South Vietnamese company and first shelled the forest and then searched the forest belt for the enemy to a depth of 400 yards. Such a rugged forest I had never seen before. There were about 500 Viet Cong in the woods, so we called in air and artillery to give us fire training. Then we bombarded the Charlies with everything we had at our disposal. The South Vietnamese company lost 45 men, and it became harder for us to press the Charlies. We had to make a lot of noise to scar them into coming out of the woods. This trick worked. The Charlies began to retreat northward, just where the South Vietnamese Marines were. The Marines turned the Charlies into mincemeat. About 400 men were killed. If they had moved on us, we couldn't have withstood their onslaught. Maybe I'd still be alive, damn it. And now, thank God, we're going back to Camp Bravo for a rest. August 11th, 1967. Got a letter from Dee Dee today. She is delightful and I love her. Writes all the time, sends good books, candy and some groceries. Can't wait to see her. I read the newspaper clippings she sent me about the unrest there in the States. My mind is all mixed up, writing about police brutality and other such things. I am beginning to wonder more and more, is the war we are waging just? August 15th, 1967. As of tomorrow, I'm on vacation, and I've earned it. I'm going to spend my vacation in Manila. I'm going to have a lot of fun. The war is coming to an end, at least for me. It'll be damn hard to go back to that hell. It's great to be back in Zulu, with sonar and radar all around you, and you know there's no way the Charlies can get in. August 16th, 1967. Manila talked to my father on the phone this evening. We talked for about half an hour. It all seemed kind of unreal. It's hard to believe that I will see my family again. I'm a lucky man. A lot of people never get to go home. When you think of the hell in Vietnam, the mud, the blood and the death, it all seems unbelievable. It's also horrible to realize that you killed someone, took someone's life, even if that someone is your enemy. That's the law in war. Either you kill him or he kills you, but you always want him to get killed, not you. The funny thing is that I've never really hated the Charlies, probably because I've almost never seen them alive. It's not the Charlies that I hate, it's the fact that they killed Greenfield, Gurney, Harris and others. September 4th, 1967. Returned to Zulu for final inspection and paperwork. Medical examination and all that sort of stuff. What a lot of red tape to deal with. All this I could have done before vacation and then home. Instead, I now have to go to Camp Bravo again to get my stuff. September 9th, 1967. A day later, I leave for home. Yay! Just got back from Bravo. The guys weren't at camp, they were on patrol in the tree line, so I didn't get to see them. While I was on a short vacation, a few people were killed. I don't know exactly who, but I did see Passmore, who's being transferred to Headquarters Company. I never liked him, but when he walked me to the helicopter where I was to leave, I couldn't help but feel sorry for him. For a long time we served together. At parting, I wished him all the best, wished him quite sincerely. He in turn said that he would be glad to meet me on the other side of the ocean, but it was felt that he had no hope of returning home. That helicopter flight to Zulu was probably my last in Vietnam. Looking down at the rice paddies I know so well now, I wondered if I had a right to be there. I had no such questions when I got into the army, but now that I was leaving here, the questions came up. There in the States, during basic military training, we were constantly told that these people needed our help, that they were poor and didn't know how to deal with their problems, that we had promised to help them and so we couldn't leave them alone. All of this is true, but at times I felt like we were doing them more harm than good. I never had the feeling that I was fighting for any just cause. I fought to stay alive myself, and I killed others so they wouldn't kill me. Now that all of that is behind me, I get a strange feeling when I think about what might have happened to me. In the midst of battle, you become so strong that you can do the unbelievable. But it's only when it's over that you start to realize it. It's hard for me to believe right now that I'm still a full human being with arms and legs. I've just been lucky and fortunate. September 11th, 1967. We are flying to the States on a nice old American airplane. The guys are sitting there smiling at each other, happy as hell to be alive and flying home. All I can think about, too, is that I'm alive and unharmed. I wanted to see the areas where we were fighting, but there was a light fog and we were gaining altitude too fast. Vietnam is actually a very small country. A lot of those guys down there are not destined to be passengers on an air trip like I was. Looking at us, the officers are smiling too. They're pilots. They've probably fought as much as we have, but at least they did not dig in the mud under the enemy's side. September 12th, 1967, 11:30 a.m. We leave Honolulu. We should be in San Francisco by lunchtime. 16 hours and 20 minutes. The California coast is showing. 48 more hours, and I'll no longer be a soldier. September 13th, 1967. Going home. I left on the 13th and I'm coming back on the 13th. Must be my lucky number. The white guy I bought tickets from at the airport looked at me several times with disdain. He tossed me the ticket like some contagious sick person. Serving in the military has made me particularly sensitive to this sort of thing. That cashier reminded me of the way I was treated by some white officers. Yes, I'm a Negro, and I'm back home, where skin colour matters. I felt good about myself as I flew on the airplane from Namesville. I thought the worst of it and all the troubles were behind me. Hell no, I had new ones ahead of me.